Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more notable names in Jewish American history. And we are going to talk about one of the great directors in movie history. Behind some of the greatest movies, Mel Brooks. Yeah, he is still alive, though he's getting up there. As you can see, 98 years of age. So we need to know about this man before we lose him. He's a special thing when it comes to entertainment. So yeah, and just making our lives more enjoyable. Let's be honest. But anyway, from Britannica. He was born June the 28th, 1926 in Brooklyn, New York. Is an American film and television director, producer, writer, and actor whose motion pictures elevated outrageousness and vulgarity to high comic art. He was an accomplished mimic, pianist, and drummer by the time he graduated from high school and enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1944. As part of his assignment to the Army Specialized Training Program, he received instruction at Virginia Military Institute, VMI. After serving as a combat engineer in Europe during World War II, he became a professional entertainer, working as a stand-up comic, an MC, and a social director at Results in the Catskills, the so-called Borscht Belt. In 1949, he joined the writing staff for the Admiral Broadway Review, a weekly television series starring Sid Caesar. He remained with Caesar until 1958, contributing material to the comedian's subsequent TV efforts, most notably the landmark comedy series Your Show of Shows, 1950 to 54, as part of a writing staff that included Carl Reiner, Neil Simon, and Larry Gelbart. In 1967, he won an Emmy for being a co-writer for the Sid Caesar Imogene Coca, Carl Reiner, Howard Morris special. Additionally, he collaborated in the librettos for the musicals Shinbone Alley and All American. As a performer, he came to prominence in 1960 when he teamed with Reiner, who acted as an interviewer to bring to life the 2,000-year-old man, a mostly improvised bit that the duo performed in television appearances and on best-selling comedy record albums. Brooks entered the motion picture industry as a writer and narrator of the Academy Award winning animated short The Critic in 1963, a devastating lampoon of avant-garde films. He and Buck Henry then created Get Smart, 1965 to 70, a television situation comedy spoofing the espionage genre popularized by the James Bond films. Yeah, Get Smart. Absolutely good show. Even if you don't believe a lot of this stuff is really connecting with today's situations, still very funny stuff because it makes fun of a lot of the hidden gadgets and techniques and stuff. It's just really good. his first films, all this was but a prelude to his auspicious feature film directorial debut, The Producers, 1968, in which was not a major success in the box office, even though Brooks' screenplay won an Academy Award. In The Producers, Zero Mostel starred as a financially troubled stage producer who teams with his accountant, played by the great Gene Wilder, to purposefully oversell shares in their upcoming production to investors. With the pro-Nazi musical Springtime for Hitler, they hope to create a production so obviously bad and offensive that it will quickly bomb and close, allowing them to abscond with the investors' money. To their horror, they end up with a hit. Despite its initial poor showing at the box office and a mixed response from critics, the film had some ardent champions, including actor Peter Sellers, and Brooks won an Academy Award for his screenplay. Moreover, with the passage of time, The Producers became a cult favorite and was eventually widely lauded as one of the greatest comedies ever made. Its celebrated centerpiece, an absurdly upbeat Busby Berkeley-like musical number, The Springtime for Hitler, and Dick Shawn's bohemian portrayal of the play within the movie's protagonist, Adolf Hitler, both typified Brooks' comedic approach as they shockingly defied audience expectations. Brooks, whose artistic sensibility had largely been shaped by his sense of being an outsider as a Jew in the mainstream American society, boldly put the ultimate villain of Jewish history, Hitler, at the heart of his comedy and transformed him into a clown. In doing so, he embodied the approach to comedy, and more specifically to parody, that film historian Gerald Mass called the anomalous surprise, the interjection of a character or situation or an event that makes no sense given the context. Brooks would return to this approach again and again throughout his career as a filmmaker. Yeah, number of great movies. They mentioned The Producers. He's also got Blazing Saddles, Spaceballs. Let's see what else. I'm wanting to say any of these great spoof movies you can think of. There's a good chance it's going to be Brooks who made it. Brooks followed The Producers with another broad comedy, The 12 Chairs, in 1970, that was set in newly communist Russia and concerned a trove of jewels hidden inside a dining chair leg. A priest, an aristocrat, and a confidence man vie to be the first to discover them, to great comic effect, though the film was little seen. It was in his third directorial effort, The Great Blazing Saddles, that Brooks cemented his reputation as Hollywood's foremost purveyor of hilarious tastelessness. He collaborated with writer-director Andrew Bergman and stand-up comedian-actor Richard Pryor, among others, on the script for this uninhibited burlesque of the Western genre, the comic targets of which range from racial prejudice to flatulence. Its stellar cast includes Gene Wilder, Cleavon Little, Harvey Korman, Slim Pickens, and Madeline Kahn, who earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress for her parody of Marlene Dietrich's saloon singer in the classic Western Destry Rides Again. The film reaped a fortune at the box office and earned Brooks another Academy Award nomination, this time for the original song, I'm Tired, So Tired. Oh, I remember that. Young Frankenstein they're showing a picture of. Again, another Mel Brooks, Gene Wilder collaboration. Equally popular was his next film, a broad but affectionate parody of Universal horror films of the 1930s titled Young Frankenstein, 1974, which earned him and the film's star and writer, Gene Wilder, an Academy Award nomination for Best Screenplay. Young Frankenstein was more carefully structured than Blazing Saddles, and its elegant black and white cinematography replicated the look of 1935's Bride of Frankenstein. Brooks reined in his more anarchic impulses, though his trademark lewd jokes were abundant, and many critics found the result more sophisticated than Blazing Saddles, which had been released less than a year previously. Less successful was Silent Movie in 1976, in which Brooks himself starred as a washed-up director who persuades the head of a motion picture studio, played by Sid Caesar, to make a silent picture. Without dialogue and loaded with sight gags, Silent Movie was less of a spoof and an affectionate homage to Max Sennett directed comedies of the silent era. High Anxiety 1977 was a more centered parody, with the films of Alfred Hitchcock as its target. Brooks again starred, this time as a psychiatrist whose life is put in jeopardy when he goes to work at the Psychoneurotic Institute for the Very, Very Nervous, the staff of which includes a sinister pair played by Cloris Leachman and Corman. Despite the presence of Corman, Leachman, and several other fine actors who were members of the loose ensemble that appeared in Brooks' films, including Khan and Caesar, History of the World Part 1, 1981, was poorly received by most critics at the box office. Yeah, History of the World, another good one. Similarly disappointing were Spaceballs, still a good movie, which was a takeoff of the Star Wars series, and Life Stinks, 1991. Brooks then directed another good movie, Robin Hood Men in Tights, a send-up of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, in which Kevin Costner had starred and was generally maligned as the legendary outlaw hero. Brooks' final motion picture as a director was the unremarkable Dracula, Dead and Loving It. I think was a Leslie Nielsen movie, wasn't it? I can't remember. Work as producer and actor with as founder of Brooks Films, an independent movie making concern. Brooks engaged in a parallel career as an executive producer of series quality films, including The Elephant Man in 1980, Francis 1982, in which he's uncredited, the 84 Charing Cross Road in 1987, and last of which starred his second wife, Anne Bancroft, whom he married in 1964. Brooks starred with Bancroft in To Be or Not to Be in 1983, a remake of Ernst Lubitsch's directed film of the same name. His work as an actor included regular appearances on popular TV sitcom Mad About You in the late 1990s, for which he won 3 Emmys, and a guest stint on the HBO series Curb Your Enthusiasm. Wow. He won a Grammy Award for the spoken comedy album The 2,000-Year-Old Man in the year 2000, in 1998. In addition He lent his voice to various TV shows and films. The latter included the animated Hotel Transylvania series. In 2019, he voiced the character of Mel Brooks in the animated feature Toy Story 4. They didn't even really try to hide his name. They was like, nope, this is Mel Brooks. You know it. You love it. Brooks made a spectacular comeback in 2001 as producer, composer, and librettist in a hugely popular Broadway stage musical based on The Producers. Brooks received several Tony Awards for the production, and with these wins, he became one of the few entertainers to have earned an EGOT, Emmy Award, Grammy Award, Oscar Award, Tony Award. Yeah. Television, music, movies, and stage. It's awesome. He followed this in 2007 with a Broadway musical based on Young Frankenstein. Brooks was named a Kennedy Center honoree in 2009 for his contributions to American comedy. His memoir, All About Me, My Remarkable Life in Show Business, was published in 2021. I'll have to get that so I can read it. I like I said, I really enjoy his movies. I see them as a gift to entertainment and making our lives more bearable, especially with psychopaths in political office like we have nowadays. But yeah, this article from 3 years ago, he talks about losing the loves of his life. People know how good Carl Reiner was, but not how great. He talks about his best friend, losing his best friend Carl Reiner and wife Anne Bancroft. The great comic has had to face great loss. But even in the middle of a pandemic, the 95-year-old, now 98, is still finding ways to laugh. The interview was at the Beverly Hills home of his best friend Carl Reiner for their nightly tradition of eating together and watching the game show Jeopardy. He's more than anyone shaped by the idea of Jewish American humor, emphasizing its joyfulness, cleverness, and in-jokiness compared with his stellar 60s and 70s when he was one of the most successful movie directors in the world with The Producers and Blazing Saddles, and later his glittering 2000s when his musical adaptation of The Producers dominated Broadway and the West End. His 80s and 90s were considered relatively fallow years, but his 1987 Star Wars spoof Spaceballs was the first Brooks movie I saw. It was one of my first too. And nothing was funnier to this then 9-year-old than the non-stop gagathon. Forget Yoda and the Force in Spaceballs. Mel Brooks is, instead of Yoda, he's yogurt. And he wields the greatest power of all, the Schwartz. I remember that. It is a good movie. I've got a Blu-ray copy of it on my little rack of movies there. I loved listening to Brooks and Reiner, whose films included The Jerk and The Man with Two Brains. The Jerk is another damn good movie. Reminisce about their 8 decades of friendship in which, together and separately, they created some of the greatest American comedy of the 20th century. The deep love between them was palpable, with Brooks, then 93, prompting 97-year-old Reiner on some of his anecdotes. It was impossible not to be moved by their friendship and hard not to feel anxiety without the prospect of them someday having to dine on his own. Only a month later, the U.S. went into lockdown, and in June, Reiner would die, following a few months later, by Jeopardy's long-term host, Alex Trebek. I remember that. That sucked. I worried about Brooks. What was he doing with all the evenings without even Jeopardy for company? Then his memoir, All About Me, arrived in the post last month. My concerns were not assuaged. It is as sparkling and delightful as you expect from Brooks, full of great advice such as how to get a studio head to give you money for your film, catch them off guard in the bathroom, and memories of making of his gold-plated classic movies. But it's also full of ghosts. Almost everyone he writes about is now dead. Reiner, Anne Bancroft, Richard Pryor, Gene Wilder, Sid Caesar, Dom DeLuise, and Buck Henry, all gone. That sucks so much. I remember Dom DeLuise, Pryor, Wilder. I've seen them in a couple of buddy movies. Yeah, that sucks, man. I became even more concerned in the run-up to this, our second interview. Brooks has never needed much encouragement to get in front of a camera, but I was told that he wanted to talk by phone, not video chat, because he didn't want to be on his screen. As I dial his number, I am braced, unsure what to expect. "Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it," says Brooks when he answers, sounding reassuringly chipper. I ask how he's been during the pandemic. "Good and bad," he says, "but my son Max, he's a very good writer. He wrote The Zombie Survival Guide and World War Z. That's Max," he said to me. "You're stuck in a house during this pandemic, and sooner or later you want to write your memoirs, so this is a good time to do it. Just write down all your stories you told me growing up." So I did that. Wow. Brooks, age 16, with his mother Kitty in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn in New York. His father died when he was 2. But yeah, I'll let you all read the rest of this interview, this article on your own. Yeah, image of Mel on the far left with his brothers Bernie, Lenny, and Irving. All 4 fought in the Second World War. An image of him with Carl Reiner. Brooks Reiner. Image of him with his late wife, Anne Bancroft. I'd still be a TV comedy writer if it weren't for Annie, because she always thought there was nothing I couldn't do. Annie was smart. I could never bamboozle her. Also, she was downright, flat out beautiful. The studio said, "Get rid of the curly haired guy," meaning Gene Wilder. "Here's a filmmaking tip: stick to your vision." I think this was during the making of Blazing Saddles, probably, when they're talking about that. Yeah. There's Gene Wilder himself in Blazing Saddles. He also played um, Willy Wonka in the original Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie. When I saw Hamilton, I wrote, "It's the best musical ever on Broadway," except for the producers. He cackles. So yeah, that's article on Gene Wilder from the not Gene Wilder, Mel Brooks from The Guardian. But anyway, let's go to Wikipedia here. Born June 28th, 1926 in Brooklyn, New York City, New York. Went to Virginia Military Institute when he was training in for the military, and that ends up being his alma mater. He's been a actor, comedian, filmmaker, playwright since 1949. His first wife was Florence Baum, whom he married in 1953 and then divorced in 1962. In 1964, he married Anne Bancroft, who died in 2005. So, unfortunately, he's been without her for a little bit now. 20 years. That sucks, man. The love of your life passing away and you are without her for so long. He would have 4 children, including his son, Max Brooks, who we talked about writing World War Z and the Zombie Survival Guide. He has Phyllis Italiano as a sister-in-law, an American politician and teacher. So many awards. They've got it to where you can go full list. Served in the U.S. Army 1944 to 1946, reaching the rank of corporal, serving in the 78th Infantry Division, 1104th Engineer Combat Battalion, Special Services in World War II, 44 to 46. So yeah. Base information on who he is. Yeah. Max Brooks, actor and author known for the novel World War Z, an oral history of the zombie war. And yeah. But anyway, he was born Melvin James Kaminsky on a tenement kitchen table on June the 28th, 1926 in Brownsville, Brooklyn, New York, to Kate and Max Kaminsky, and grew up in Williamsburg, which I believe is also in Brooklyn, if I remember right. His father's family were German Jews from Danzig. His mother was a Ukrainian immigrant, Jewish immigrant from Kiev. I believe Danzig's German, ain't it? It says it just German community of Gdansk, Prussia. Not, I don't think it was quite German, but yeah, it was right next door. Um, in the Pale of settlement of the Russian Empire, present day Ukraine. Three older brothers, Irving, Lenny, and Bernie. His father would die of tuberculosis, TB, of the kidney at the age of 34 when Brooks was only 2 years of age. He had said of his father's death, "There's an outrage there. I may be angry at God or at the world for that. And I'm sure a lot of my comedy is based on anger and hostility. Growing up in Williamsburg, I learned to clothe it in comedy or to spare myself problems like a punch in the face." Apparently, he was a small, sickly boy who was often bullied and teased by his classmates because of his size. At the age of 9, he saw Anything Goes with William Gaxton, Ethel Merman, and Victor Moore at the Alvin Theater. After the show, he told his uncle that he was going to work in the garment district like everyone else, but instead wanted to go into show business. So he had that yearning to be in Hollywood from a young age. He was 14 when he gained employment as a poolside tumbler entertainer at the Butler Lodge, a second-rate Borscht Belt hotel, where he met 18-year-old Sid Caesar, big name in comedy himself in the early days. Brooks kept his guests amused with his crazy antics. In a Playboy interview, he explained that one day he stood at the edge of a diving board wearing a derby and a large alpaca overcoat with 2 suitcases full of rocks, and then announced, "Business is terrible. I can't go on," before jumping, fully clothed, into the pool. He was taught by Buddy Rich, who had also grown up in Williamsburg, how to play the drums and started to earn money as a musician when he was 14. During his time as a drummer, he was given his first opportunity as a comedian at the age of 16, filling in for an ill MC. During his teens, he changed his name to Melvin Brooks, influenced by his mother's maiden name, Brookman, after being confused with trumpeter Max Kaminsky. Brooks graduated from Eastern District High School in Williamsburg in January 1944 and intended to follow his older brother and enroll in Brooklyn College to study psychology. In early 1944, in his senior year in high school, Brooks was recruited to take the Army General Classification Test, a Stanford Binet test, type IQ test. He made high scores and was sent to the Army Specialized Training Program at Virginia Military Institute to be taught electrical engineering, horse riding, and saber fighting. In 1944, Brooks was officially drafted into the Army. 12 weeks later, when he turned 18, he officially joined the United States Army at Fort Dix, New Jersey, in Introduction Center, and was sent to the Field Artillery Replacement Training Center at Fort Sill, Oklahoma for basic training and radio operator training. Brooks was then sent back to Fort Dix for overnight assignment. He says he boarded the SSC Owl at Brooklyn Navy Yard on around February 15, 1945. A reporter for the U.S. Department of Defense writes that Brooks arrived in France in November 1944 and later in Belgium, serving with the 78th Infantry Division as a forward artillery observer. So yeah, at this point, the squeeze on Germany had already started because you had the USSR coming in from the east, the UK from the northwest, and the US from the west. So yeah, it was the squeeze had kind of started because it would be around this time they would start freeing France and be moving forward. Serving with the 78th Infantry Division as a forward artillery observer in December of 1944. A short while later, he was transferred to the 1104 Engineer Combat Battalion as a combat engineer, participating in the Battle of the Bulge, one of the big battles of World War II. Of his experience there, he says, along the roadside, you could see bodies wrapped up in mattress covers and stacked in a ditch, and those would be Americans that could be there. I sang all the time. I never wanted to think about it. Death is the enemy of everyone, and even though you hate Nazis, death is more of an enemy than a German soldier. So yeah, singing, he's like, I'm keeping my mind off it, I'm just doing my job. Sing, sing, sing. Yeah. Stationed in Saarbrücken and Baumholder, the battalion was responsible for clearing booby-trapped buildings and defusing landmines as the Allies advanced into Nazi Germany. Brooks was tasked with landmine location. Defusing was done by a specialist. Brooks has stated that when he heard Germans singing over loudspeakers, he responded by singing American Jewish singer Al Jolson's hit, Toot Toot Tootsie, Go By, into a bullhorn. Brooks spent time in the stockade after taking an anti-Semitic heckler's helmet off and smashing him in the head with his mess kit. As I don't blame him. I don't blame him one bit. His unit constructed the first Bailey Bridge over Roer River, later building bridges over the Rhine River. In April of 1945, his unit conducted the last reconnaissance missions in the Harz Mountains of Germany. At the end of the war in Europe, Brooks joined the Special Services as a comic touring army bases and was made acting corporal, put in charge of the entertainment at Wiesbaden, and performed at Fort Dix. In June 1946, Brooks was honorably discharged from the Army as a corporal. So, after the time he had left, after World War II, with the time he had left, he just basically did a tour as a comic for the military. That's pretty cool. His early work and breakthrough. Yeah, Brooklyn Naval Yard, the Borscht Belt, Catskills. Sid Caesar hired him to write jokes for the DeMont NBC series The Admiral Broadway Review, paying him off the books $50 a week, which at that time is pretty good. You're doing fairly well. In 1950, Sid Caesar created the innovative variety comedy series Your Show of Shows and hired Brooks as a writer, along with Carl Reiner, Neil Simon, Danny Simon, and head writer Mel Tolkien. Carl Reiner created the Dick Van Dyke Show. That's pretty good. But yeah, bunch of information about his times in Hollywood. We won't go into that too much. We've talked about it some already, but yeah. There's, an image from Get Smart. Like I said, they just made fun of all the hidden gadgets and stuff from, like, James Bond. But yeah, shoe phone. It'd ring and he'd take it off. Hello, Chief? Great Gene Wilder on several films. Young Frankenstein, Blazing Saddles. (1948) film Treasure of the Sierra Madre. I wonder where Fallout New Vegas got that DLC name from. Yeah, let's see. What else we got here? Young Frankenstein, Blazing Saddles. High Anxiety. Yeah, Robin Hood Men in Tights. We're men in tights. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Yeah. In 1980, Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, referred to Brooks and Woody Allen as the two most successful comedy directors in the world today, America's two funniest filmmakers. So yeah. Boo-doo-doo. He sought to purchase the rights to 84 Charing Cross Road for his wife, Anne Bancroft, for many years. Also produced the comedy Fatso in 1980 that Bancroft directed. History of the World Part 1 was a tongue-in-cheek look at human culture from the dawn of man to the French Revolution. Written and produced by Mel Brooks with a narration by Orson Welles, it was another modest financial hit, earning $31 million. It received mixed critical reviews. Critic Paul Kell, who for years had been critical of Brooks, said, "Either you get stuck thinking about the bad taste, or you let yourself laugh at the obscenity in the humor as you do Brunel's perverse, dirty jokes." Let's see. He produced and starred in, but did not write or direct, the remake of To Be or Not to Be. His 1983 version was directed by Alan Johnson and starred Brooks, Anne Bancroft, Charles Durning, Tim Matheson, Jose Ferrer, and the great Christopher Lloyd, another great actor. It generated international publicity by featuring a controversial song on its soundtrack, the Hitler rap, satirizing German society in the 1940s with Brooks playing Hitler. He loved to make fun of Hitler and use him as a target. It in several of his movies you can see where he's just kind of spoofing Hitler, making fun of him. Let's see what else we got. Yeah, they had a musical adaptation of The Producers on Broadway 2001 starring Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick. So while it didn't have necessarily the success and acclaim in 1967, the musical adaptation on film actually did. Uh, ba, 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 ba. Let's see what else we got. Brooks met Florence Baum, a dancer in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, on Broadway. They were married from 1953 until their divorce in 1962 and would have 3 children together. After earning a salary of $5,000 a week on Your Show of Shows and Caesar's Hour, his salary dropped to $85 a week as a freelance writer. For 5 years, he had few gigs and was living in Greenwich Village on Perry Street in a 4th floor walk-up. In 1960, he escaped his situation and moved in with a friend in Los Angeles. In 1961, after his return to New York, he found that Florence Baum had begun suing him for legal separation. Marriage is a Dirty Rotten Fraud was an autobiographical script based on his marriage. By 1966, Brooks was living in a fairly old but comfortable New York townhouse. He would then marry actress Anne Bancroft 2 years later in 1964, and they remained together for 41 years until her death in 2005. They met at a rehearsal for the Perry Como variety show in 1961 and were married 3 years later on August 5th, 1964 at the Manhattan Marriage Bureau. Their son, Max Brooks, was born in 1972. In 2010, Brooks credited Bancroft as a guiding force behind his involvement in developing the producers and Young Frankenstein for the musical theater, saying it was an early meeting with her. From that day until her death, we were glued together. He has remained single since she died, stating in 2023 that once you're married to Anne Bancroft, others don't seem to be appealing. According to actor David DeLuise, Brooks is his godfather. DeLuise's father is the late great comedian Dom DeLuise, a frequent co-star of Brooks in his earlier career. Interest, voracious reader, secret connoisseur, worshiper of good writing, and expert on the Russian classics, with special reverence to Gogol, Turgenev, Dostoevsky, and Tolstoy. In the producers, Bialystok refers to Bloom as Prince Mishkin, a character from Dostoevsky's The Idiot, and the name Leo Bloom is a reference to Leopold Bloom, hero of James Joyce's Ulysses. Regarding religions, he says he's rather secular. I'm basically Jewish, but I think I'm Jewish not because of the Jewish religion. I think it's with relationship with people and pride I have. The tribe surviving so many misfortunes and being so brave and contributing so much knowledge to the world and showing courage. He has consistently expressed pride in his Jewish identity. I love being a Jew. I love Jewish humor. On Jewish cinema, he said, they can be anything and anywhere. If there's a tribal thing like the please God, protect us feeling, we don't know where and how it's going to come out. Avatar was a Jewish movie. These people on the run, chasing and being pursued. Brooks endorsed Biden for 2020 presidential campaign, his first ever public endorsement of a political candidate, and endorsed Kamala in 2024. And then they list his albums, soundtracks, references. Okay, there's his bibliography, books he wrote. Anyway, Mel Brooks. I'm glad I got to do this one. I like Mel Brooks. Awesome dude. Awesome dude. And he may have had to spend the night in the stockade because of smashing his kit into the face of an anti-Semite, but hey, man, sounds like that was well worth it. By all means, smash the face of any racist. But we'll go ahead and end this here. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll be putting my links and sources in the description box below the video. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.